4:30. Greetings, everybody. Dear colleagues and distinguished guests, I'm Suzanne Johnson with the UN Global Compact, and welcome to this session today where we're going to have some very, very hopeful and concrete examples of how we can use the ocean to move forward to fight climate and biodiversity loss. Our ocean is critical for human existence and the cornerstone of the blue economy. More than 3 billion people rely on the ocean for their food, jobs, and livelihood. But the impacts of climate change, overfishing, and pollution are putting our ocean at great risk. Protecting the blue economy from mounting threats isn't just a moral imperative, but it's actually a growing financial opportunity, and that's what we'll be talking about in part today, how you can make money off the ocean and help it. If we manage it appropriately, it really is a win-win for environment and health, and in the emerging markets and around the world. So today, the financial sector is actually waking up to the opportunities that a healthy ocean can provide. It has a critical role in playing and pivoting global economic system towards rebuilding prosperity, restoring biodiversity, and regenerating ocean health. A recent report from the high-level panel on the sustainable ocean economy, which represents 18 heads of state, says that if we implement ocean-based climate solutions that are actually ready today, we can get 35% of the way we need to go in order to reach 1.5. So that's nearly a third, actually that's over a third, of climate solutions that can happen in the ocean to get us to 1.5. Protecting the oceans is a no-regrets action. There's only benefits that we will draw from a well-managed ocean, and climate is just one of those benefits. Just this week, the high-level climate champions announced their ocean breakthroughs. They talked about ocean solutions, whether it's in shipping, ports, sustainable seafood, nature-based solutions, but they all need financing to get there. And there's real momentum for building blue finance. You know, we have these instruments. We have blue bonds, we have blue loans. They're emerging instruments that use fund for ocean-friendly projects. And we're seeing a real surge in those. But despite advancements and developments in the financial markets, the sustainable ocean economy finance gap is widening. So if you think about it, if the UN estimates that we need $3 to $5 trillion by 2030 to meet the SDGs, 14 is the least funded, as well as the blue economy, and particularly from the private sector. So we really need to see a paradigm shift. It's necessary to realign the global economy by growing the blue economy. So today we have a multi-part session. Each is very exciting. We're going to discuss how to unlock sustainable ocean funding and preserve our blue carbon ecosystems. So in the first panel, we'll be focusing on mobilizing greater finance with a focus on private capital. The second panel, we're going to discuss the importance of nature-based solutions. We're going to take a look at blue carbon ecosystems, which are not just carbon sinks, but they're also vital for protecting biodiversity and supporting coastal communities. Given what we're going to talk about today, we could have no better ambassador for the ocean to inspire us than Sylvia Earle. Mrs. Earle is an ocean explorer and a scientist, and you probably know, that could be the reason why you're here, she holds the record for the deepest walk on the seafloor. Mrs. Earle was the first woman to lead the U.S. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, that's NOAA, and she's a National Geographic Explorer at large. It's my deep honor to introduce Her Deepness, Sylvia Earle, the president and co-chair at Mission Blue, to deliver a keynote speech. Thank you very much.
What an honor it is for me to be here with you, to have an opportunity to speak for the ocean, and in so doing, speak for the future of everything we care about, because there's plenty of evidence right now that if we fail to take care of the ocean, our life support system, the system that holds most of Earth's water, governs climate, planetary chemistry, holds most of life on Earth, 97% of the biosphere. If we fail to take care of the ocean, nothing else matters, because that is truly the blue heart of the planet. How much of your heart do you want to protect? We're suggesting it's time to get serious. Protect 30% of the land, 30% of the ocean. Now, I say that's a good start. But we really need to think, how do we keep Earth habitable by whatever means, including looking at those most sensitive areas where we can focus attention, do everything we can to safeguard the deep sea that is still relatively undisturbed. Look at the polar regions that are still relatively undisturbed. Looking at the high seas, the best chance we'll ever have, armed with 2 new treaties. The protection is within our grasp of policies for the high seas. It's within our grasp to look at biodiversity of life, the fabric of life that shapes the chemistry of the planet, is responsible for generating the oxygen, the natural carbon capturing mechanisms. And we can come up with, and we should, look at the strategies for engineering solutions to capture carbon, capture methane. But if we fail to take care of what already is capturing carbon and holding it in place, in the deep sea, in the earth, in wildlife, on the land, the birds are carbon. When you think the ocean is filled with living carbon that we seem perversely determined to extract millions of tons with subsidies to accelerate the extraction of carbon. We call this seafood, we call it products, we call it tuna, we call it krill, we call it whatever, but it's living carbon that if we are serious about climate change and doing what we can, we'll do our utmost to hold seagrass meadows, mangroves, kelp forests, the great populations of ocean wildlife in place. Perversely, while we're taking live carbon out of the ocean, we're putting dead carbon in the form of plastics in the ocean. It's not the right ratio. We're putting into the ocean things that we shouldn't have there and taking out of the ocean those very living elements that make the biogeochemical miracle of Earth a possibility in a universe that is not very friendly to the likes of us or the rest of life on Earth. So, I am a hopeless optimist. Actually, I'm a hopeful optimist. And I say that because for the first time in all of our history, all of human history, the history of life on Earth, there is a species, that would be us. The first time, even in our own history, that we know what we know, that could not be known before the middle of the 20th century, when the use of fossil fuels enabled us to go high in the sky, to understand things that we could not understand before, to go deep in the ocean. And maybe one of the most important things that the energy that we have burned through in recent decades has given us is not only knowledge, but the ability to communicate that knowledge widely, to be able to analyze the evidence, to look at the patterns, to project the future based on what we do or what we fail to do. Now, I'm fully mindful of the economic pressures that we have facing us in the 21st century, that the way that we measure wealth, that we measure value, has come through our whole history as a species that thinks differently from, say, whales, chimpanzees, elephants. Only humans create waste. Only humans have this way of thinking about wealth in terms of things. And understanding that in the context of where do we go from here? How do we secure an enduring future? How do we maintain our level of prosperity? The things we do value, whether it's art, music, our history, the history of life on Earth, whatever it is. If we fail to face up to the reality of consuming nature on a scale that is, however we currently measure it, we're not doing it sustainably. We continue to draw down water, continue to eliminate species. We're on a track right now to lose 1 million species by the end of this century. 1 million of the creatures who hold the planet steady, who make Earth habitable for us as well as for them. What to do? Nature over the years, since the beginning of life on Earth, has prospered mostly by cooperation, systems, partnerships, that ecosystems, you may call it. We too, as humans, have prospered more because of cooperation, working together, building cities, building our cultures. Here we are in the 21st century with what looks like the greatest era of prosperity for humans that there ever has been, with 8 billion of us. And yet, we have not fully accounted for the costs. But we now can do that armed with knowledge and armed with knowing that working together is the right recipe for advancing to a better place. Many people regard ecology, nature, as something over here, human prosperity, the economy over here. The reality is, it's like this. You cannot have a sound economy unless you have a sound natural world. You cannot have a sound natural system at this point in time unless people are well fed, that they are able to anticipate a future. A sound economy is necessary to be able to embrace what remains of the natural systems and restore what is possible. So I'm so pleased to have a moment just to salute you, all of you, for coming together to find solutions. How do we create businesses that keep in mind as a focus, how do we work with nature? How do we restore systems that, when we did not know what is now known, we unfortunately lost, but maybe not lost forever? We still have the best chance we'll ever have to safeguard the polar regions, to safeguard the high seas, to safeguard the deep sea. We can pause and think over the next 10 years, or maybe the next 7 years before 2030, but to just, before destroying more of what remains of the deep sea. Why would we even think of starting deep sea mining when it is so disruptive? When we want to keep carbon in place, when we want time to think, how can we work within what we've got to get from where we are, which is now on a downward slope, to recovery? We know it's possible. What's missing is not knowledge, although there's a lot we don't know about the planet that we need to know before we go forward. So hit the pause button. This is the moment, best chance we'll ever have to say, let's work together. Economy, the natural world, find a way so that we can prosper, not just to 2030, but for centuries, for millennia, for all of the future of life on Earth, at least our life, our species. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was marvelous and hopeful, and helps us to think about taking lessons from nature to move forward and build an ecosystem. May I please now thank, first of all, DP World for hosting us here today in this beautiful space, but also with your leadership. And may I introduce Maha El-Katan, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for DP World, the global company who's building large ocean strategy to make things better in an environment that they operate in globally. Please, may I turn it over to Maha.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Thank you all for joining us here today for our discussion on forging a sustainable future for the ocean. I'm excited to see so many sectors represented here to focus on the sustainability of our oceans. In combination with nature-based solutions, we have an opportunity to step up our stewardship of blue economy. Covering 71% of Earth's surface, our oceans absorb 90% of excess heat caused by climate change. Addressing a challenge as large as our oceans requires global collaboration and greater focus through dedicated ocean strategies. For us at DP World, the ocean sits at the heart of our business, with 90% of traded goods carried across them. It is natural that water, including our oceans, is one of DP World's 3 legacy pillars under our sustainability strategy, Our World, Our Future. We're committed to making ocean enhancement a part of our legacy. Our vision is to nurture a thriving ocean and a stable climate that supports equitable trade. Today, I'm proud to announce the launch of DP World's first dedicated ocean strategy. This strategy provides a comprehensive framework to directly address environmental and societal challenges related to ocean health. Our ocean strategy has 4 core areas of action: regeneration of ocean ecosystems, safeguarding healthy waters, enabling sustainable communities, and finally, increasing capacity for ocean and climate solutions. We will restore and enhance biodiversity in the areas where we operate, ensuring net positive outcomes and prioritizing projects that benefit nature, climate, and people. and I'm proud to say we're already making great progress. Earlier today, here at COP28, we announced our partnership with UAE Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. Together, we will work to restore mangroves around the world in line with international frameworks. We also announced our membership of the Mangrove Alliance for Climate, supporting them with the restoration projects in the areas where we operate, using a science and nature-based solution approach. Starting next year, we will begin 3 mangrove restoration projects across the subcontinent, Southeast Asia, and Africa. We just announced the launch of a regional Ocean Climate Nexus Center with our partners at United Nations Global Compact. This center is designed to be a prime source of case studies and learning opportunities for climate solutions in ocean industries. This will be part of a larger network of ocean stewardship centers run by UN Global Compact. The way forward is clear: more partnerships from across the sectors we have here with us today will be key in unlocking nature-based solutions, driving the blue economy, and financing the long-term health of our oceans. I hope today's session marks another step forward in this critical journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maha. That was quite inspirational, learning about your strategy that you've just launched. May I invite up our first panel to take a chair. This is about ocean finance. Please do come up. Thank you very much. Well, we have a brilliant panel today. We're actually going to hear some very practical recommendations from across the finance value chain on how to scale up private investment in the ocean economy space. We're going to hear from a government, a multilateral development bank, a capital markets expert, a banker, and insurance. So let's start in, and I really want to start just to give you an idea of how the ocean economy can be financed. This is a real-world example, and dear Minister Edwards, Your Excellency, congratulations on issuing a blue bond framework this week for the country of St. Lucia. Tell us a little bit about why St. Lucia thought about blue bonds, also what you're hoping to achieve when you do issue the bond.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this very distinguished panel. Before I answer the question in terms of what can be derived by ways of benefits from the blue bonds, let me put into context how important the ocean is to St. Lucia. In terms of land mass, we are just 238 square miles with a population of 180,000 people. But the good thing about it for us from an ocean standpoint is that we are entirely surrounded by water. And we have had to face many difficult economic challenges as a government to provide for our people. And we have at our disposal an ocean resource that we've not been able to leverage, we've not been able to explore for economic reasons, of course being cognizant of all the environmental principles that we must subscribe to ensure that we do not damage the marine ecosystem. So a few days ago, right here in Dubai, I had the opportunity to represent Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre of St. Lucia, where we launched our first blue bond framework. It is a form of economic diversification for us, and I want to, also, before going further, profit the opportunity to thank all the collaborating agencies working with us to make that a reality, and to speak generally about the support we've been able to receive from friendly governments and international agencies. And I want to single out the government of the UAE for the support that we've received, because even prior to arriving here from St. Lucia, we had a visit from a minister from the UAE, as well as the president of COP. So with the launch of the blue bonds, it is a new revenue source that we're looking to tap into that will help us deal with some of the environmental issues we've had to grapple with. Because in a small island state like St. Lucia, where the government is really at its wits' end trying to get revenue to provide for people, it is important that we find alternatives to the established tourism revenue by having the blue bonds that will help us treat with environmental issues, thereby giving the government greater flexibility in terms of resources from other streams to provide for our country. We have done a lot by way of having a policy document that informs how the ocean is governed and how it is used. Because as a resource, it is used by many different sectors. The ocean is a critical component of our tourism product, and we also have fishing as a main form of livelihood for a significant sector of our population. Our ocean is also used for transportation, for cruise vessels, and for even trade vessels carrying cargo from South America to North America. So it is a tremendous resource, as I said, that has been there from time immemorial, but there had never been a deliberate attempt by way of programming to tap into that vast resource to bring about economic benefits, but at the same time ensuring sustainable use and protection of the ocean. So I'm extremely grateful that we've been able to launch the blue bonds as a form of finance for the government of St. Lucia. And I'm hoping that although we are at the embryonic stage of that process, given best practice and some of the examples that would have been established before ours, St. Lucia will be able to thrive in that regard.
Thank you very much, and congratulations again. It's probably a good time to segue then to a multilateral development bank. And we've got Adonai Herrera Martinez, and you lead the environment and sustainability for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. Countries, but also companies and projects around the world need support, need help in getting out issuances. So love to hear from your perspective, and maybe a little bit more broadly, why MDBs are so important in creating the building blocks to scaling up a blue economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Well, I'd like to thank you for the invitation in joining this stellar panel. That's first. And let me briefly introduce what the EBRD is, because we might not be the best known multilateral development bank. We were created in '91 to promote transition to market economies in the former Soviet Union. We do project finance, and we focus on private sector. We operate roughly between Morocco and Mongolia, between Estonia and Egypt. So that's a snapshot of who we are. And I'd like to speak to you about 4 things: safeguards, metrics, barriers, and innovation, right? And those are in a way, that's the value proposition that MDB can bring to nature finance and to blue finance as well, which is the topic of today's panel. On safeguards, there cannot be ocean finance without do no harm principle. So that's the basis, that's a conditio sine qua non for any type of impact financing, right? MDBs have robust frameworks, typically that go beyond environmental social safeguards that are applied nationally, in order to make sure that we don't do harm neither to the environment nor to the populations around our projects. And it was important to hear Dr. Earl mentioning the communities around investments, because they are key to gather the social license to operate for all of us, right? But focusing on project is starting to be just not enough. We need to start looking at corporate actions, right? Money is fungible. We need to start working with corporates, with clients, into developing transition plans. We're doing this on climate. We are not just investing in projects, but for between quote-unquote risky sectors, we're helping clients develop transition plans for nature, for oceans. The work should be similar. In fact, it should be integrated in what could be called nature transition plans, right? And that should include biodiversity and, of course, the oceans. For nature and for ocean action, moving on to indicators, the complexity of indicators is quite vast. So how can we measure the health of marine ecosystems? Well, there's quite a lot of discussion, and scientists in the COP might be much better qualified than me for sharing, but metrics seem to be coalescing into three type of indicators: the extent of ecosystems, the condition of ecosystems, what is the biodiversity, the richness of biodiversity of those ecosystems, and then the productive uses, the uses that society gathers from modified or from intact ecosystems, right? So we need to make sure we, and then summing up what I said before, we mitigate and we eliminate any negative impacts on ecosystems, and we maximize the positive impact of our projects on the ecosystem around us. Susan, you asked me about barriers. Generally, nature action is hindered by the fact that investments in nature tend to not generate enough cash flows for being bankable, right? And that's a key role for multilaterals like us. We need to make sure we support the creation of revenue streams for nature investments. That is in the form of business models that rely on nature for their operations, like sustainable tourism, for example. And we were talking about tourism before. His Excellency was saying how important sustainable tourism is, or creating the markets that compensate investors for nature positive action. And where I'm talking about blue carbon, I'm talking about biodiversity credits, right? And I'd like to share an example on the business models. We operate in Egypt and we operate in Jordan. Some years ago, we financed an investor, a high-end hotel in the Aqaba region that actually recovered degraded land where they built a 5-star hotel. They also invested in restoring the natural reef in front of their shoreline, and beyond that created an artificial marina where they invested on a nursery. These are the type of investments we should be fostering. That's just one sector, but we should look into sustainable agriculture and other sectors that promote the recovery of nature. And just to finalize the role of NDVs, well, our role is to actually support demonstration projects that can be replicated across our countries and create the markets that compensate for these activities. And to finalize, here, 1 week ago, that feels like ages ago, we launched the so-called Blue Mediterranean Partnership, inspired in another partnership that we had in the Baltic for many years. It translated that example, the example of investing in the pollution prevention and in the blue economy, now in the Mediterranean. So the partnership is open, and whoever want to join as a cooperating partner will be welcome. Thank you, Susanne.
Thank you very much. You're laying the groundwork for very good practice in scaling up in the Mediterranean. I think that's modeled after something that you did in the Baltics, and hopefully this will become more and more replicable in terms of transforming regions, ocean regions around the world. Thank you for that. Let's get really practical and turn into the markets. And I want to turn to Tom Eveson, who runs sustainability in the Americas. And just to talk about Sustainalytics, you verify capital markets issuances like bonds that move money at scale. You are steeped and you're really active in the markets. You've probably done over 1,000 issuances on sustainability bonds. So what are you seeing right now? What are the trends you're seeing in the blue markets?
Thank you. Is this good? I think what's incredible to watch over the last several years is the diversification of the sector from pure green bonds and renewable energy, wind farms, solar parks, to where we are today, where everything's focused on transition, hard to abate sectors, and bringing in social issues, of course. And I think what we get the constant question when we're participating in any of these transactions. We've got the underwriters, multilaterals, and of course the issuers are the people doing these projects. And there's often the question of, what's in it for me? What's the greenium? Where's the advantage of doing a green bond versus a normal bond? And I like to step back from that and just say, why don't we go to something we all understand, which is supply and demand? And what I've learned, because of our now parent company, is Morningstar, and their main thing is researching mutual funds and fund assets. There's $500 billion now in Europe in open-ended funds that are mandated for climate transition deployment. There is $300 billion in undeployed loan money within the Department of Energy in the United States. there is Macquarie Green Fund and the Green Climate Fund, the main Green Climate Fund, that have billions and billions of dollars that they need to deploy into these projects. I haven't even begun to add up the assets with the multilateral banks or even the bilateral national development banks that have all come here to announce that they need to deploy capital into this industry. And I think we need to remember that the demand for credible, transparent, impactful projects, whether it's transition or dark green industries, is probably outnumbering the availability of good projects of 100 to 1 at the moment. So if there's an advantage to pursuing this, it is that if you are credible, the money will come. And it'll come in such a large amount that we can fund this 10 times over with the money pledged. It's just a question of getting those projects to market.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, I'm going to quote you on that. 100, there's, for every $1 we need invested, there's $100 swimming around there, ready to be deployed. It's just figuring out, how to access that. So okay, just as a follow-up, what's holding it up? What are those challenges? Why can't we connect that 100 with the 1? Or why can't we make the 1 100?
A lack of collaboration. I see it right across the industry. We're in a very privileged position in this because I'm involved in many transactions at the issuer level, people trying to come up with great plans to transition cement, aerospace, shipping, wind farms, and everything in between. And we speak to all of the funds that are looking for projects to invest, and that extends right across the world in debt and equity. And an example, we're looking for deep blue industries when it comes to blue finance to do something incredible. The pelagic industries, as I call them, the shipping and fishing, industrial fishing, we'd like to see them change because they should. But a ship company cannot do this on their own. They need a port infrastructure. They need fuel supplies. And there needs to be something in it for them other than they should, because those people will lose their jobs if they lose their competitive position. So I saw, as one example, give me 2 years and I could clean this up, or in a lot of situations. Amazon made an announcement that they're reducing their emissions by 50% by moving away from air delivery to trains and shipping. Amazon is one of the largest shippers in the world. They know their routes and the most busy routes to the CCAN level. On any given minute, they know what's coming. We have port development infrastructure capital available to the right of me. We have shipping companies and ports in front of me and above me. And we can do this in a collaborative way. I've got the United States being the biggest importer of all of this. We know exactly where those ships come from. So rather than doing a global network, we could work together with the port development, the development banks, the shipping companies, and Amazon to guarantee an offtake of those shipping routes on renewable fuels and the port. And so what I'm saying is be bold, be innovative. Sustainable finance does not have to be the responsibility of one company and their one change. It can be a collaborative ecosystem that comes up with that together. And again, I actually don't live in, I'm global now and I live in Europe, but the DOE's program for energy efficiency in vehicles, they decided to fund the entire ecosystem. They have the auto companies, the battery makers, the extraction, distribution, all at once. And I think that that's the answer. A shipping company can do it, but it needs collaboration and cooperation from the groups around it. And now we've got one route that moves more products than any other route on Earth at net zero very quickly. Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah. No, thank you. And that Amazon example is an excellent example of moving the ecosystem forward and tying back into what Sylvia Earle said. Let me move to another part of the ecosystem, which is insurance and risk. It's critical. And I'd like to introduce Sarah Conway, who's with WTW, the global insurance broker. But before you were there, you were the climate negotiator for the U.S. delegation in Paris. So you have a long history of climate finance. And let's know your thoughts on the role that insurance plays in this kind of knot that we're trying to pull apart and put back together.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for having me today on this esteemed panel. It's a pleasure to be here and to see all of you in the audience, so thanks for joining us. So, I mean, as I guess with all of the instruments we've been discussing, insurance is indeed just one of many, and always needs to be sort of considered in the context of a broader portfolio of relevant conservation and climate finance instruments. At WTW, we have been developing a number of parametric insurance solutions that are aimed at supporting ecosystems, coastal and marine ecosystems in particular, associated livelihoods, so parametric insurance that supports small-scale fishers, for example. And also, we have developed the world's first resilience wrapper that we wrapped around the Belize blue bond issuance on the back end of their debt conversion effort in 2021 that helps to protect their ability to provide the ongoing debt servicing from key climate-related risks. So we're really sort of deploying insurance, and in this case parametric insurance, in pretty innovative and interesting ways to help ensure that there is protection for ecosystems. Before I go any further, though, if I lost you at parametric insurance, maybe just very quickly on what parametric insurance is. So parametric insurance is a risk financing instrument that pays out a pre-agreed amount to a policyholder based on predefined event characteristics. For example, wind speed. And in this case, these predefined event characteristics are structured and designed to serve as a proxy for the impact, the financial impact that a given climate-related event would have. Unlike indemnity insurance, which is what you're probably all more familiar with, which requires a quantifiable sort of damage and oftentimes a rather lengthy loss assessment process, parametric insurance has opened up the possibility of insurance cover in contexts like for coral reefs, that previously would not have been viable in the indemnity space. And unlike indemnity insurance, which again takes time to pay out, parametric payouts usually occur within 2 weeks of an event. So it's really fast. When we think specifically about insurance for supporting investments in the ocean ecosystems, we generally tend to see sort of two clear sweet spots where there's probably a good reason to at least consider the possibility of, again, including insurance in a broader suite of interventions. One is where having that liquidity very quickly after a shock event has high value. So to offset losses in income, to enable immediate reef restoration interventions that are really only valuable and viable if conducted quickly after, for example, a hurricane or cyclone event. And the other example, or the other place where we see a high value for parametric insurance is if you're guaranteeing that important payments will be able to be made after a shock event, either reduces or eliminates the normal revenue stream that supports those payments. So to ensure that a given sovereign is able to continue to service their blue bond obligations after a climate event has had a 15 or 20% impact on their GDP, being able to basically have the insurance payout cover that debt servicing and allow the country to instead focus on the immediate humanitarian response and other efforts. It gives them a bit of a fiscal space that they wouldn't otherwise have. So yeah, we're really trying to push the envelope, I guess, of how parametric insurance can really ultimately help broader and more robust flows of finance into coastal and ocean ecosystems.
Thank you very much. And it helps us to see if we know we're getting an automatic payout after some sort of event, then it gives surety to all those involved and investors in the markets. It's really interesting, that development in the insurance markets. May I turn to Torsten Thiel now? You're a financial strategist. You've worked in banking. You're developing all these structures. But you're also involved in nature. And can you talk a little bit about, what you're seeing in terms of investment thesis in nature? With the biodiversity framework, I think investors are starting to understand and be more interested in investing in nature in the ocean.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here on World Ocean Day for the COP. So talking about ocean and its centrality to the global ecosystem is a core opportunity today, and we heard from Dr. Sylvia Earle about that importance from a natural ecosystem perspective. What I am proposing is that the same applies from a financial ecosystem perspective. The ocean is and can be at the core of how we transform our financial system, our investment thesis to align with nature for a just and long-term transition for people. And that means several things. So we're working, for instance, with the International Union for Conservation of Nature on examples of that in particular locations, how blue natural capital, how blue carbon ecosystem can be financed, can provide long-term opportunities for nature and people. But at the same time, we need to integrate these ideas that we heard from Sarah on Insurance, from Adonai around the work of the development finance institutions. And so thought leaders like that bring contributions on how we can create blue natural capital as an investable asset class, how we can use blue infrastructure so that we inset nature-based solutions into the design of infrastructure so that we deal with resilience challenges, deal with adaptation challenges. We set up the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance as one of these mechanisms to bring countries, large-scale investors and projects together, because we need a common framework, a common narrative around it. The UN Global Compact is doing stellar work to help all of us identify, focus on these investment theses. And we heard from Tom that there's already a range of tools and financial products that we can use. Suzanne mentioned the Ocean Panel report that we wrote on ocean climate finance solutions. The 35%, a third of the climate challenge we can address just by focusing on the ocean. But it's really more than just the direct opportunity now. It's about how these ecosystem-based approaches can be improved through an integrated way of thinking about these solutions. We need a data ocean infrastructure through better remote sensing, through granular information, through just-in-time information to actually manage these nature assets. But that same infrastructure helps to optimize shipping, helps to optimize the use of oceans, helps to minimize the negative impacts that can come from human activity. So we are at a revolution, I would say, towards sustainability, towards being able to understand the complexity of nature and make sure that our financial engagements align with what nature is aiming for. So this is a really important journey. This is an important COP to bring ocean more centrally into the debate. When we started at the Paris COP, we were a small group pushing for ocean in the discussion. We now have ocean climate dialogues. We have a much greater engagement from the private sector and the public sector. So it's an important stage, and we're moving that framework.
Yeah, we're moving forward together. And maybe I would just ask a quick question. Thank you, Torsten. Back to Minister Edwards. Talking about the ecosystem, when you issue a blue bond, you will need other parties, or you will want other parties to come in and work with. What's your experience from working with multilateral development banks, or what would your ask be from them to issue blue bonds?
Thank you very much. And I would have made the point in my opening remarks that we cannot go it alone because we just do not have the experience. And therefore, support from the outside is critical. But working with multi-development bank, national development banks, has been an experience. They've been quite supportive in the main. But the truth be told, because of the number of boxes that have to be checked on occasions, to access resources, it can be a bit onerous, it can be a bit frustrating. And given where we are at in terms of living on the front line of climate change, sometimes the resources do not reach us in time to be able to program effectively to assist our people who sometimes have to recover from hurricanes and other forms of disasters. But we are heavily reliant on partnerships with the international community, be it private sector organizations, banks, friendly governments, etc., to get us to where we want to be. I have an eye on the clock, as you do, and I know you are telling me that I probably need to wrap up as well. But let me just say, because that might just be my concluding remark, that I'm extremely pleased to be part of this panel. I think it has been very insightful, and St. Lucia, as a small island developing state, stands to benefit tremendously from this global setup.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you. Adnai, in just a minute then, can you respond to the minister and you know, what he might need, or your thoughts of how other organizations in your ecosystem may support a country like St. Lucia, recognizing that EBRD works with the private sector?
Thank you, Susan. And I must say, I would come and work in St. Lucia in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, go back. Unfortunately, we don't cover St. Lucia, and we're focused on the private sector. But our colleagues from the Inter-American Development Bank have been cooperating with the Nature Conservancy in Barbados, in Belize, and in Ecuador in developing these debt for nature swaps, especially on the protection of marine ecosystems. And I would imagine that's an area that St. Lucia would be very keen in exploring, because it offers huge potential for the public sector to provide supply of ocean capital to the demand that Tom was referring to, right?
Thank you so much. Tom, very quickly, what's your final advice to people wanting to do some deals here?
I'll repeat what I said earlier.
Who wants to do a deal in the audience?
Yeah, there is no rule for this. The first green bond was just a few years ago, and there is still an open runway ahead of us. Be innovative, be bold, be creative. There's enough capital sitting in this campus to get it all done many times over. So be transparent, be credible, and the money will come.
Thank you. Sarah, very quickly, people want parametric insurance to help get their deal off the ground.
Yeah,
Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, it would just echo those points. I mean, and to, I guess, reiterate what you made earlier about collaboration. I mean, I think you necessarily need a lot of different actors involved in these. You know, the example I mentioned earlier, the Belize Blue Bond that came on the back end of a larger debt for nature debt conversion, that took years, right? And a lot of different actors coming around the table and providing different nuts and bolts into the mix. So talk to each other, right? Make those connections and relationships, and yeah, collaboration is key.
Thank you. And finally, Torsten, we're going to segue into blue carbon. So thoughts from the financing perspective as we get ready, advice, thoughts, a question we should ask them, the blue carbon panel.
I think it's a great moment for blue carbon, because we now have a common framework. We've got a mangrove breakthrough with a financial roadmap attached, and we've got a team of science, of conservation expertise. So it's a great entry point for people who want to invest in the space to work on these high quality transactions that are coming out of the blue carbon space.
Thank you very much. What a great panel. I've really learned a lot. Now, if I may ask the blue carbon panel to come up, please. Oh, yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to have a seat. And this one, let's have a little bit more interaction, because we have three blue carbon experts, and blue carbon, as we know, can be a revenue stream. This is what we're talking about funding in a way. So let me introduce the panelists, who are experts, and then let's get started. So first, I'd like to introduce Ayla Bagwa, who's the Senior Vice President for Sustainability of DP World. And Ayla, you have sustainable finance sitting under you. You've been working with the Mangrove Breakthrough, and you've been integral in developing that strategy that Maha talked with us about. But I'd love, as a segue from our finance panel before, if you could talk to us about your thoughts about financing blue carbon, mangroves, and give us some thoughts to start out that might provoke our other panelists.
Thank you so. Hello? Can you hear me?
No.
Thank you so much for that question. So I'd like to take a step back and talk about what DP World actually does as a business, and then explain why blue carbon ecosystems are so important to us as a business then. So historically, we have been a ports and terminals operator. We have now expanded into end-to-end logistics solution provider. We work in 63 plus countries, a lot of those countries being in the global south, a lot of those countries also being within emerging markets. And because of our historical background with ports and terminals, we are actively involved in coastal regions. And so we are driving the blue economy. We're a big part of the blue economy. We sit in it. And so with that, we understand that we have a responsibility towards nature-based solutions and ecosystem restoration. And hence, we have launched our ocean strategy that looks at ecosystem restoration, but if you notice, also blue finance. And we've had a lot of debate about it internally. Are we ready for blue finance? And what does that look like for DP World? And I think a big challenge for financing around nature-based solutions is the fact that a lot of that financing needs to be directed towards emerging markets. So those are markets that are already high risk. And then you're looking at nature, which is a non-traditional investment. Now, many of my panelists mentioned in the last conversation, which I found interesting, was 10 years ago there wasn't even a green bond, and this year in September, DP World is very proud to share that they issued a $1.5 billion green sukuk, probably the largest in the world. But it took a lot of cooperation, it took a lot of capacity building, and we were well positioned because we are comfortable, particularly if we're looking future forward in nature, we are comfortable in investing in emerging markets because we don't see them as emerging markets, we see them as growth markets. And so for us, it is a license to operate, but also our customers have often been governments, right? So a lot of the time, the question is, what are you doing for our country versus what are you doing for in terms of like your solutions or for business? And so with that mindset, we know we have a responsibility, but we just need to get all the actors around the table and create something that is investable and that makes business sense.
Thank you very much. And you talked about getting the actors around the table, and this is a good opportunity to turn to Emily from the World Economic Forum, and you've been actively developing blue carbon solutions for the forum. The forum, what they do is they bring together players around the table. Tell us a little bit about your findings on collaboration around blue carbon and what you're focused on.
Thanks so much. It's really wonderful to be part of this panel, and thanks, Suzanne, for that really important question. So the World Economic Forum, as you may be familiar, is particularly keen on bringing different parties together to find solutions, notably public-private partnerships, and increasingly public-private and philanthropic partnerships. And in the blue carbon space, we wanted to be able to support by being some of this coordinating body in two different ways. One is at a national level. We're so pleased that at COP28 we signed a strengthening agreement with the government of Indonesia as our first National Blue Carbon Action Partnership, and with the government of the Philippines as our second National Blue Carbon Action Partnership. And what those partnerships will do is establish secretariats in country that will work across a group of stakeholders to identify the blue carbon ecosystem conservation and restoration ambitions of each individual country and work on creating a roadmap to achieve those ambitions. And importantly, within that roadmap is how you finance the implementation of that roadmap. So we're really thrilled to be working with these country partners and to be contributing to a space that is quite busy in many places, but hopefully can find synergies across all existing projects and help to streamline and align policies within countries as identified by those countries so that they can welcome additional investment. And then at the global scale, we're thinking a lot about how the forum might be able to contribute from our community and our partners in terms of tackling some of the big challenges. And one of the things that we're really excited about thinking more about that's so relevant to the discussion that's happened here is thinking about blue carbon finance. And I think importantly, when we're talking about blue carbon ecosystems, of course, we use the word carbon in defining them, and yet we're really talking about so many different benefits. So I think the previous panel talked a lot about the portfolio of options for driving investment into these ecosystems and ensuring that there are benefits for the community. And so we're really excited to be thinking more deeply about this with partners, notably also, of course, the finance roadmap that was referenced. Torsten teed up at the end of the last panel that was just released by the Mangrove Breakthrough. We're really looking forward to being a supporting partner in thinking about the implementation of that roadmap. So I'll stop there, but really looking forward to this cross-sectoral partnership that can exist across the corporate space, philanthropic, thinking about civil society actors, community leaders, et cetera.
Thanks so much. And, you know, blue carbon, like ports, but blue carbon is a link between coastal communities and the water. And Conservation International and Patricia Zarada, you know, CI is known for its super high quality projects that you're focused on in communities. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be here, and I just wanted to echo a little bit what Sylvia started when she set up the scene. I mean, the ocean is an extraordinary part of the solution for climate. And we sometimes don't realize that the ocean is a sink that has 30% of the carbon of the planet, and that can hold 42 times more carbon than the atmosphere. So it's an absolutely crucial element. And the coasts around our islands and our continents are extraordinary ecosystems that are not only important to maintaining that system on the ocean, but particularly maintaining our people communities safe. The mangrove areas, the seagrasses, the areas of coastal access to people are incredibly important for livelihoods, but are incredibly important in terms of the potential mitigation that they have. And blue carbon is one of the ways of making them financially viable. Unfortunately, while mangroves, for example, can capture 5 times more carbon than rainforests, the reality is that what you have is really strips of land along the coast, right? You don't have these chunks of mangroves that really extend masses of hectares. So we really have to go back and work together along the coastlines and make sure that we are bringing together all of these different pieces of mangrove so we can really capture that amount of carbon that we really need. Now, the huge advantage that we have when we're doing that, and in terms of the financing element, is that you can, and as you were saying before, it's not only the carbon element that this is actually providing, is the climate resilience, is the adaptation to a changing climate. It's what we were talking about in terms of insurance, making sure that we are making these communities more adaptable to what we are going to see as the impacts of a changing climate. But in addition to that is a production system for fisheries. Without mangroves and without near coastal areas and in proper state, we cannot have fisheries functioning, and we cannot feed not only the local communities that depend on these resources, but the rest of the world. So ensuring that we have high integrity blue carbon projects that are benefiting local communities, that are helping us bring biodiversity back, that are helping us ensure the adaptability and the resilience of these local communities now and in the future is exactly what CI has been doing. And we have a couple of examples. We have been working in Colombia and Cispata for the last 10 years. We have been working in Indonesia. We're working in West Africa. We're working in Southeast Asia, because these are tremendously important ecosystems, not only for carbon, but particularly for biodiversity and for maintaining the health of the oceans. So we are a huge proponent and have been behind the mangrove breakthrough that just got announced a couple of hours or maybe an hour ago. We have been working heavily with the rest of the conservation community and academia that is part of the Carbon Alliance and the Global Mangrove Alliance. We want to make sure that all of these pieces that Tom was talking about come together so we can finance these deals a lot faster and enable these local communities to really benefit from the service that they are providing, not only to the ocean, but to the rest of the planet.
Thank you. And for those who, if there's anybody who's learning about the mangrove breakthrough, does somebody want to tell a little bit more about that breakthrough that just happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can jump in as well if you want to. So last year, the government of the UAE and the government of Indonesia came together and made a very important and ambitious statement about working together to bring the rest of many more governments to really push for mangrove conservation and restoration. In the meantime, we have been working with the Global Mangrove Alliance that has over 80 members from academia and the NGO sector, and the Mangrove Alliance for Climate that is over 20 government members. The Mangrove Breakthrough, what it does is create this umbrella to bring all of these different spaces of mangrove consultation and conversation together and make sure that we can really mobilize finance at the level that it actually matters. So it's basically bringing all of these conversations that have been happening with the NGO and academia sector and the government sector on the other side to make sure that we can work together and make sure that we can really finance all of these potential restoration conservation projects that can help us make sure that we have a much more stable climate, but that we help support local communities as well.
We are just thrilled to be supporting the Mangroves Breakthrough, and I know it has a wonderful, ambitious goal of mobilizing $4 billion by 2030 and conserving and restoring 15 million hectares of mangroves.
And if I might add in from, is it working? Is it working? Yeah, it's working now. If I may add from a private sector point of view. So it was interesting. So the Mangrove Alliance for Climate was announced by the Ministry of Climate Change, and as DP World, we're very invested and passionate for mangroves. Now that was an initiative that spoke to countries, and so when we spoke to the Ministry of Climate Change about our interest in contributing to this larger initiative, we were then pointed in the direction of the Mangrove Breakthrough, which is, yes, mobilizing conservationists, but also mobilizing the private sector. And so as DP World, we're very proud that we're probably the only private sector organization that has signed up and become a member of the Mangrove Alliance for Climate, because we do want to support these larger scale government initiatives, recognizing the roles we play in the countries in which we operate.
Thank you. On that note, though, thanks for coming into the Mangrove Breakthrough. You have thoughts on crowding in some other corporate activity there? How can we get more corporates doing what DP World has done in the mangrove breakthrough?
I think it goes back to my initial point about capacity building, right? So again, if you look at the landscape about 10 years ago, people were hustling to figure out what is their role in mitigation, right? And now we're in a place where I would say, 80% of the larger and industry players, leading industry players, do have net zero targets. And so mitigation is quite well understood. The role, and you brought it up so beautifully, that oceans are a part of the solution. They're part of the mitigation solution, and there's not enough awareness about that. And so I think for more private sector entities to get on sort of this sort of nature journey, they need to understand the larger part it plays in the climate change universe. So we need to stop looking at mitigation and adaptation separately, and of course issues of community that are often covered under just transition, but look at it as interlinked. So really it's bringing everything together. So bringing these thematic focus areas to cooperate and bringing people like us on the panel who come from different backgrounds together to really find a middle ground, a solution that brings that will bring long-term impact. And I think that's where DP World, just on a final note, differentiates itself, is I think why it drives us, as well as we're long-term investors in ecosystems. And so long-term investment in ecosystems goes beyond just how much we're investing in infrastructure, but it goes, again, it's an ecosystem mindset. So how we invest so the long-term benefits to an area in which we operate, or a country in which operates, brings business value to us because we're there for the long haul. So I think that shift and that capacity building needs to take place with other private sector players.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And in a way, you've been able to put a price on it in your long-term models and your long-term strategy. I'd love to hear from the panel in terms of, what are the developments in terms of valuing nature, and, how can we put a price on nature or specifically on blue carbon streams? Emily, do you have some thoughts on that you could share?
Sure, I'd love to. And I'd love to piggyback off of your wonderful comments, because I think corporate investment into these ecosystems is a really wonderful pathway and really exciting. And we at the World Economic Forum have a 1 Trillion Trees initiative, 1t.org, where we also have seen a large number of pledges for mangrove conservation and restoration projects. And just wanted to reference my figures here for one moment, but we have 91 pledges through 1T, and 23 of these include mangroves. And just a recent update from 7 of these pledges accounts for 43 million mangroves that are conserved or restored across 17 countries. And I think that, with the wonderful example of DP World's commitments, it just really speaks to the exciting opportunity that exists in the corporate sector for being able to mobilize and move forward in these nature positive strategies. To the point of pricing, I think blue carbon ecosystems, in the Indonesia pavilion earlier today, we were talking about them as sort of like the very fancy purse of you're not getting like a budget sort of purse when you're looking into investing in them. They've got all these different pieces of all the benefits that we were talking about, so important for communities, for livelihoods, for food security, for biodiversity, et cetera. And I think if you're talking about carbon as one tool for investment into them, then that results in a very high carbon price, which is really exciting. Other tools that I heard on the panel before us talking about biodiversity credits, certainly you could think about that as being internalized in that carbon price, or you could think about that as a separate credit that you could be thinking through. Resilience credits, I know also some of our colleagues are working on rolling those out. So there are a number of different ways, and I would point also to just broader natural capital assessment and accounting that's being done by many to think about how we can add additional value and think about this as a specific asset class.
If I can jump in, I mean, the reality is that we are already seeing how much more valuable blue carbon credits are versus the traditional carbon credits from REDD and terrestrial systems. So you're comparing between, 13 in the best case scenario dollars per carbon credit on land to between $50 and $60 per ton of carbon of credits of carbon or blue carbon. And the reality is that that price difference is actually already incorporating a lot of what you are getting as other benefits: resilience, adaptation, the possibility of really moving an economy around it, around aquaculture and around fisheries. So those values are already started to be integrated. What we need to do is start doing and replicating and getting to scale those deals. Now, in terms of private sector involvement, one of the reasons why we're not getting private sector involvement is because these deals are not being guaranteed. So there's still a little bit reticence from the private sector of getting involved in this because there's not reassurance of and guarantees that the returns are going to be there. So the multilateral banks play an incredibly important role in de-risking these deals, in getting involved and supporting and guaranteeing these deals, so then the private sector can come in and put their private investment there, and then we can actually have actual financially functional projects. But unless we actually make all those pieces work together, and you heard it from the Minister of St. Lucia, working with multilaterals is incredibly complicated. It takes time. But unless we actually put all of these pieces together and we make sure that those projects are truly benefiting nature, benefiting local communities, and enabling, that adaptation, that mitigation together with climate, with disaster prevention, then we're not going to be able to make them be as valuable as they are right now. So those projects that I was citing that we have been able to secure are a handful of projects that we need to be able to replicate. And hopefully the mangrove breakthrough is going to help accelerate this process with this financing that they are talking about.
That was very clear. Already are you seeing building on from one project to the next? Are you starting to see standardization and replicability to where it's a shorter time frame from the beginning of the deal to establishment?
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. So we started with a tiny little project in Indonesia. We have right now over a dozen projects around the world, right? But it is, the complication comes in when the rules of the government are not clear, and when you don't have these guarantees to make sure that you can bring in the private sector to the table. I think the elements of engaging the local communities, finding solutions for local production systems, ensuring that we can do restoration and protection, those things we know about very, very well. It's more about how do we integrate that financial element so we can actually replicate this at scale much faster. But things are happening. A couple of days ago, there was already an announcement. The government of Cambodia is pushing for a whole coastline restoration site. It's not mangroves. It's actually coastal resilience with seagrasses. But those are incredibly important as well, and those will bring blue carbon. Probably not as much as the mangroves, but incredibly important as well. So I think looking at that large-scale ambition is incredibly important, and looking into what are those elements that unlock the large-scale investment, like making sure that we have those guarantees in place, are absolutely key.
And if I may add to that from a private sector point of view, so completely agree. We're waiting for the market to mature to dive in, right? And I think it goes beyond blue carbon. I think just generally the carbon market is in an interesting place for another time to talk about. But at least from a private sector point of view, because we recognize that, look, from diving into the market is probably not what we're ready for right now, but we do have a responsibility again to play when it comes to the science, innovation, and education. So if you look at our ocean framework that Maha shared earlier on, we have, through that pillar, supported studies and thought leadership around blue carbon, so we can propel the industry and the market so that we get closer to a place where we are comfortable to invest. So that's one element. So, I think there's different types of engagement at different cycles of each component. So this is how we're indulging or how we're contributing now. But secondly is also leveraging the expertise. So you were very kind, Suzanne, by introducing me as a blue carbon expert, but I'm not. I'm a sustainability expert, and so I have a wonderful blue carbon expert in my team who guides us, and I think that's what the business needs, right? We need blue carbon experts like yourselves to guide us on what sorts of projects we should be investing in. So we are, so you would have heard from Maha's opening note that we will be contributing and investing in mangrove restoration projects in 3 countries. But what we need to ensure is that those projects are set up for success. And those projects will be set up for success as long as we ensure that we're following like IUCN standards, high quality standards, making sure these projects are high quality so that when we are ready or the market is ready, then we can leverage those projects. So we really look to your expertise to feed into the projects that we're investing in so that everyone is set up for, the climate is set up for success in the long run.
Thank you very much. That was incredible in terms of how we're looking at this from civil society, from a convening power, from a finance angle, and from a private industry angle. I'd like to reconvene this panel in 2 years and see how far we've come. Is that the right amount of time, or are we going to see a big difference next year? If we were to come back, when should we come back? Next year? Next year. In here, yeah. No, I really thank you so much to the audience. Thank you so much to my esteemed panel. You've given us great ideas and inspiration on climate, ocean, nature, solutions, and how we can get those done. Thank you so much.